Welcome back, everybody. It's Jack Graham and John Peterson with another epic podcast of We Talk Photo. John,
Epic.
I know you're not prepared for this, but we got an email the other day, folks, that we made the top 20, some crazy top 20 list of landscape podcasts. We should put that banner up. There's some other good people on there.
We should.
So I guess the word's getting out somewhere. What number is this? Are we up?
137. So not a
137.
ton.
Wow, that's a lot. That's pretty good.
It is
Well,
good. We just
one of the first guests we ever had is the gentleman sitting to my right. I believe it might be on your left as we look. I don't, are we backwards here or are we,
yeah, it's on the left.
whatever. The better looking guy in this photograph is my best friend, Bill Fortney. And if I remember right, if we went back to like one of the first podcasts we ever did back years ago was with Bill, if I
Yeah,
remember right. You remember
yeah.
right?
I think that's correct.
Yeah. Well, anyhow, so I'm up at Bill's today, up in uh, beautiful scenic Corbin, Kentucky. It's about 75 miles north of where I live down in Tennessee. And I get up here, probably not as much as I'd like to, but quite often, and check things out and make sure Bill's behaving himself. And unfortunately, he's behaving himself today. And I had my laptop in the car, and I figured this would be a great time to just revisit with Bill because it's been too long, and
Been a
it's
long
kind of fun to
time.
be in the same spot, you know. Usually, when Bill talks and we make him full frame, I can kind of, you know, scratch my back and do things. So I have to behave myself here today. So we're both in the we're both in the video. Anyhow, it's good to have you. And
Thank you,
I'm
sir.
not kidding you. Bill is my best friend in the world. No offense, John.
None
Um,
taken.
but I can also tell you that if it wasn't for Bill, I wouldn't be here. And I'm not being what's the big? It's a big word. It's when you hit 100 years old. I can't remember this. I'm not being gratuitous to saying that while we're here. But when I first decided I wanted to take a photograph, I took one of the workshops that Bill offered in Great American Photography Weekend, and maybe we'll get him to tell that story. We became good friends, and la di da di da to today, where I honestly, and I'm not just saying this, one for Bill. And I'm not the only one. We were just talking about this on the way to lunch, who Bill has kind of brought along in the industry. He's an icon, and if you find anybody that knows Bill, I don't think there'll be anybody but one or two people who have anything bad to say. Anyhow, thanks for taking some time. We're going to knock this out, and then I'm going to head south over the mountain. But
Yeah.
this is a great
Well,
opportunity.
just to add on to what you said, Jack, though, I keep thinking back to at times that if Bill hadn't have gotten you into this profession, I never would have met you at this little event in Sherwood,
You know what
Oregon,
it is,
many
John? It's
years
like the
ago.
football coaches. They say this is the Parcells tree, or this is the
Yeah, yeah.
Belichick tree.
Part of the
Well, this
Bill
is the
Fortney
Fortney
tree.
tree.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, we could spend an hour here talking about different people that Bill's made able to have some great years in the business. Enough about me. Let's talk about you. What do you think about me?
Couldn't have a higher
It's
opinion.
one of our greatest lines when we do our workshops together. So, John, I thought maybe today we could maybe do a little walk down memory lane, as they say, and just it's a long process. I'm going to do some videos. Bill's not going to write a book about himself. A, I don't think he wants to. B, it's a pain in the neck. So I'm going to do some videos with Bill. I'm going to put up on my YouTube site. But let's just take a walk through from the beginning and see where that goes.
All right. Sounds good. I do have one important question for Bill. Hopefully I can work that in at some point. But yeah,
You
go
do?
ahead, Jack.
Okay. So, when we do these things, everybody says, well, when I was a kid, I always had a camera and I always, it's the same old stuff. Was that the same old stuff?
Actually, I was a high school teacher and a high school football coach. And back in that day, long time ago, to be a coach, you had to take the freshman team for a while, for a season, and kind of prove yourself. And then you got to go up to the varsity squad. And I was the freshman coach at a high school up in Harlan County, Kentucky. And the team that I coached set a record that will never be broken. The school has been replaced, it doesn't even exist anymore. So nobody will even get a chance to break my record. My freshman team not only didn't win a game, we didn't score in an entire season. And I think I got to thinking, maybe coaching is not going to be my future. Maybe I should take up a hobby. And I had always been interested in photography. So I went out and bought a decent camera and changed my life. I spent my every waking moment studying photography and reading and learning all about it. And it just was the beginning of this incredible 55-year career that I'm celebrating this year. So
55, John.
Yeah.
Think about it.
That's that's a lot.
And you
Well,
were just-
Bill,
you
Bill,
were just
I
being
think
born.
Bill, you just said one key word, and that was studying. Studying photography, learning how to do this well, and too often that step gets overlooked by people, I think.
I lived in a small community in eastern Kentucky, and there wasn't but maybe one photographer in town, and he had the local studio. And he wasn't particularly interested in teaching me because he wasn't looking to create someone to go in business against him. So I just, I got my education in the beginning from the worst possible sources, modern and popular photography and all the other photo fan magazines that existed. But I read every article, and of course there was no internet back then, so there wasn't YouTube to go to learn things. But I just, I'll never forget, I went and got a darkroom kit and put it in the downstairs bathroom and made my first print. And I ran up the stairs to show it to my mother and dad. And by the time I got to the kitchen, it had turned black. I'd forgotten to put it in the fixer.
Oh.
And so I think that kind of defined what my learning experience was like. I had to learn everything the hard way. But it was good for me. I really wanted to learn. I wanted to get better, and it was an important part of the process.
And then you went. It was so that was when you were, in your formative years, and then after that, when did you go working for the magazine that you did all those interviews? And maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
Well, after a few years of teaching, we had a mine disaster, the Scotia mine disaster in Kentucky, and I had happened to have a camera, and I went to the site where the mine disaster took place, and I got photographs that ran in newspapers all over America because I was the only photographer that got there first. And right after that, I was hired by the local newspaper to be a daily newspaper photographer for them. And after several years of doing that, back to the mining industry again. There was a lot of coal mining where I lived in Harlan County, and one of the biggest mining companies in the region realized that they needed a PR person after they saw the disaster that happened after that Scotia mine disaster. And they hired me as their kind of PR guy, and also worked with the unions to kind of keep peace. And I wanted to find a way to tell the story of what coal mining was all about, to the local community. So I talked my boss into us producing what best used to be called a mega paper. It was a like a newspaper, but on better print and a little larger. And I did feature stories on the employees, their hobbies, what they did. And then, of course, we would do stories about what the mining industry was doing. And it was kind of a soft sell of the mines and the people that worked there. And as a kind of crazy idea, I thought, if I could get celebrities to let me interview them, people would want to pick this rag up that I was producing. And I didn't know any celebrities, but my first cousin, my father's sister's son, was an actor who at that time was quite well known, Ned Beatty. And Ned had made the movie Deliverance and had started to be in other movies.
That must have went over good.
Oh yeah, I'll never forget taking my grandmother and my old aunt to see the movie. Had no idea. All I knew was about canoeing, and I had to do a lot of apologizing for that. But anyway, Ned, of course, graciously agreed to let me interview him. The interesting thing about getting famous people to do something is if you can name another famous person that you interviewed, then people will say, oh, yeah, well, if you interviewed Ned Beatty, then I'll let you interview me. So I made a list of people that I thought would be of interest to our readers. And I started doing celebrity interviews. And before long, I had interviewed 60 or 70 big name celebrities at the time. Barbara Mandrell, Red Skelton, of course, who was still alive and working then, and just a number of other television and movie people. And the vast majority of them were very nice and happy to sit down and let you talk to them.
Sports guys.
Yeah, well, a lot of professional sports athletes. My mother and father were very good friends with a sportscaster named Kaywood Ledford. Kaywood Ledford had been for many years the voice of the Kentucky Wildcats, but he lived close to my mother and father, and they used to play bridge every Wednesday night. And I grew up in the floor, and so I knew Kaywood, and that was kind of a big catch. So Kaywood was nice enough to do an interview. But anyway, that kind of opened the door to another job with Richland Conrich Energy later.
Bear Bryant.
Oh yeah, Bear Bryant.
Roger Staubach.
Roger Staubach.
Wow.
See how modest he is?
Yeah, but there was a lot of, at the time they were household names, and but it kind of got my name on the map a little bit, just getting to meet all these people and learned a lot about celebrities. The interesting thing I learned that the really super famous people, like Barbara Mandrell is a good example. I mean, everybody knew who she was, but she couldn't have been kinder and nicer. I took my son Wesley with me on that interview. He was just a little boy, and she had Wesley up in her lap, rubbing his hair, and I wanted to trade places with him. But she was just gracious and gave me a great interview. And that led to, like I say, doing a lot more of that kind of stuff. And of course, my photography grew as I was going these kind of places and meeting these people and photographing them. So that was kind of how it all started.
Tell them about the Pulitzer.
Well, that's kind of an interesting story. When I worked for the newspaper, I was assigned to go to a Ku Klux Klan rally that was being held up one of the hollows in the county where I lived. And I can't remember the guy's name, but he ended up being a congressman, but he was pretty famous. He was the grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. So I went to this rally to photograph him. And while I was there, they had this gigantic cross, and they, of course, set it on fire, which is what they do at those rallies. And another photographer, a good friend of mine, was standing next to me, and we both had Nikon cameras with 24 millimeter lenses, and the cross burned through at the bottom and started to fall towards where we were standing. we were just out of the area where it would hit us, but it was encircled by all these guys in their white sheets. And as the cross fell, they all started running from the cross. And it made a poetic image. Here's all these guys burning across, and then it's coming down on them and they're running from it. And this friend of mine and I both raised our camera at exactly the same time. Both had the same lens, shooting the same kind of film, and clicked off one frame and got them running from the cross. What happened, he worked for the Louisville Courier-Journal, which was a very well-known newspaper back then, photographically. He went back to his paper and he turned in his photograph. I went back to my paper. I moved mine on the wire, on the AP wire, because I did work for the AP, and of course to my paper. Somehow, my photograph ended up at his newspaper on the wire. And when they were sorting the pictures, my photograph got laid on the table next to his. And when they put together their submission for the Pulitzer, they chose my photograph instead of his. They were identical. There's no difference in the photographs. And he was a great photographer. Well, so later they win the Pulitzer, and that photograph was a big part of that. It was a key part of it. And I get a phone call from the director of photography there at the Courier. And he said, I've got to ask you a question. What do you want done with your portion of the Pulitzer? And I said, what are you talking about? I don't have a Pulitzer. He said, well, actually you do. He said, we accidentally entered your photograph in the portfolio that was judged to win the Pulitzer. And in all fairness, we have to tell you that your picture was in the winning portfolio.
Wow.
You like that?
Well, the other photographer is a dear friend, a guy I admire greatly, and who really deserved that more than I did. I asked the director of photography if he had informed the photographer, and he said, no, I wanted to discuss it with you before I let the word out as to what happened. And I said, why don't we make that our secret? I'm leaving photojournalism. It won't do a thing for me to have had a part of a Pulitzer. And I mean, I'm not advancing my career in that area. And he deserves it. Let's let it be something you and I know about, but it doesn't have to be discussed anywhere else. And that's the way it ended. Many, many years later, I was at a photo event where both that director of photography and that photographer were there. And the photographer came over to me and said, you know I know what you did. And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I really didn't. I'd forgotten all about it. And he said, well, about that Pulitzer deal. And I said, well, you've had an incredible career and you deserve the recognition. And, like I say, it wouldn't be a hill of beans to me. And he said, well, I wish you'd feel free to share what happened. He said, you and I both know our pictures were identical. We could have been co-winners. I said, well, I've mentioned it to a few friends, but I'm not going to put it on my resume because it doesn't affect me one way or another. And that's actually the way the story ended. And I haven't told that story a lot, in fairness to him, because it doesn't in any way take away from him. He got exactly the same shot that I did. Yeah. We just happened to. And the really funny thing is we covered 2 or 3 football games together, standing next to each other again. And it happened 2 or 3 more times. We got identical shots, and we laughed about it through the years that we seem to have the same sense of timing about things happening. But yeah, that's how that happened. And like I say, I don't put much weight on that. It's a nice thing to think about, but if I was going to stay in photojournalism, I probably would have had to have considered that, because it really would have advanced your career to have that.
Oh, yeah.
That's to you. But
then a lot of people don't know, John, that Bill was the photographer for the Washington Redskins. Did you know that?
I don't think I knew that. No.
See?
Well, a very, very dear friend of mine, back long before I met Jack, Don Nelson, who was a legendary Nikon salesman who lived in Washington. He called on National Geographic and the Redskins. and they talked him into doing photography for them. And late in one season, their sideline photographer was injured. The players came out of bounds and rolled over him and broke his leg, and he was pretty seriously hurt. And so I got a phone call the next day from Don saying, is there any way you could come up and cover? They were going into the playoffs. Could you come up and cover for us as a sideline photographer? Because I had been doing quite a bit of NFL photography. And of course, I was thrilled and I said I'd be happy to. Funny story, I had an abscessed tooth, and my dentist said, when you get on an airplane to fly to Washington, it's going to hurt really bad. He said, so if your grandfather, I think, has a heart condition, you need to get a Demerol tablet from him and break it in half. And if it starts killing you, take a half of it and save the other half for the flight home. But that ought to get you through the game. Well, I got on the plane and went to Washington. And on the way up there, I mean, it started hurting so bad I didn't think I could stand it. So I took a whole Demerol. And I have no memory of getting there, going to the stadium, shooting the game, getting back on the subway, going to the airport, flying home. I was knocked out. And the next day, I got a phone call from the director of photography of the Redskins. And he said, are you a sports photographer or a fine art photographer? That's why I do sports. He said, well, he said, your photographs were just swirls of beautiful colors. Apparently, I used a 300 millimeter lens and a slow shutter speed, and all I got was just color. He laughed about it when I told him what happened. And he said, well, we're going to have you back to find out if you can shoot. So I went to another game and they were happy with that. And I did a little bit of work for them off and on, but they did name me the official sideline photographer for the Redskins, and, which opened more doors, which was kind of cool. But so my career seems to be a series of mistakes and circumstances that put me in a better position than I probably would have been in. So,
well, I think it speaks to a great life, almost philosophy, Bill, where if you're opened, if you open yourself up to possibilities and just, be not closed-minded, not closed off, and not putting yourself in a box, and you're open to doing whatever, amazing things can sort of manifest for you, and it'll lead kind of in this different
that's
journey.
the story of a lot of other photographers' careers. They got a break. They got an opportunity to do something that they probably would have never had. And things went well for them. And the next thing you know, they're shooting for Sports Illustrated. And I met a lot of those guys through the years and was always fascinated to see that my career was not all that different than anybody else's. I just was very fortunate. And you work hard, you do the best you can when you get those opportunities, but you never have to give up on the idea that God was watching over you and allowed you to be in a position to shine when you got the chance. So,
You're in the right place at the right time, but you still have to perform.
Yep.
And you still have to, put out the results and, and Bill is, he's done that. Hey, so prior to GAPW, for those, the Great American Photography Weekend, what did you do for the years before that?
Well, of course, a lot of that time was taken up with those jobs working for the coal companies.
Yeah, okay.
And then I decided I had learned a lot about photography and I wanted to learn more. And I thought, boy, it would be great if I could get the photographers that I admire, that I thought were the best of the best, if I could work with them and let them teach others, and I could learn too. And so I came up with this idea of a workshop company. At that time,
what year was it?
That was in the early 90s. I think our first year was 1990. But I had balls as big as church bells. And I just thought, I can do this. And I contacted the people who at that time were the best of the best and said, I'm going to start this workshop company. And luckily, I offered them a significant amount of money. And they all said, yeah, I'll do that. I'd be glad to come and teach at a fair like that. There had been a state park, there is still a state park close to where I live, Cumberland Falls State Park in Kentucky. And they had started a photo weekend there, which involved a photo contest and then people speaking. And they asked me would I help with it, and I did. And it turned into a big deal. They got to where they were getting a couple of hundred people coming to this thing. And I saw how successful the concept was. And I thought, you could take this nationally. And if you got big enough names to draw in a big crowd, you could do this. And that's how that started. I heard.
And John, this is before the photo workshop business became what it became. This is.
Yeah, there were a few people doing workshops, but nobody done anything. At one time, we were the biggest advertiser of Outdoor Photographer magazine.
Full page.
Yeah, full page ads. And those things were not cheap. But we were able to run 10 or 12 events a year at major national parks and get 200 people to pay to be there. No way on earth you could do that today. But it was an idea whose time had come. You think about people, John Shaw was the kind of the god of nature photography. And people would give anything to just meet John, shake his hand. But for $125, they could spend a weekend with him and get to talk to him and maybe feel like they get to know him a little bit and get in a contest and maybe win some nice prizes. And at all of our locations, 200 people said, yeah, I'll pay $125 to do that. And honestly, all I did at those things was run what was going on in the background and introduce the speakers. But I got to be friends with all of those big name speakers. And I certainly watched what they did and what they taught. And I started learning a great deal from the best in the business.
So let me just say this, and Sean, you know this as well as anybody. It's tough, and people who go on photo workshops, they a lot of times don't know what goes on in the background. And you know what we do for 5 to 10 people? Imagine having 200 people. I mean, think about that. I mean, that's, Bill's, Bill, he's understating what it took to do this. And, he brought some people in that helped and, brought in how Bill got these people. I think a lot of them wrote for outdoor photography. And back then, if you didn't write for outdoor, you were not much.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a great story that everybody should think about when they're going to try anything like this. I was sure I knew what I was doing, and I didn't have any idea what I was doing, but I thought I did. And the very first one we did was in Tucson, Arizona, with the late Galen Rao. And the people who came to see Galen were like these monks that you see in these things where they're walking along and hitting themselves in the head with a board. I mean, they just worshiped the land that Galen stood on, and they took it really seriously. And we go down there, and everything that could have gone wrong at an event went wrong.
Parking.
Yeah. One morning we all went up on the mountain to shoot sunrise, and the parking lot that could accommodate the number of cars that went up there was locked up and closed. And the sheriff was out threatening to arrest people because they were parking on the side of the road. The room that we had 215 people at that event. On the wall, there was a plaque said maximum capacity 175. So, I mean, and the ceiling, the little gal that told me that she had a 12-foot ceiling, it was 9 foot 6 inches, and I had a 10 by 10 screen. I couldn't even stand the screen up straight. So everything. It was all the things I didn't think of that I should have thought of. So I really was surprised that they didn't hang me in effigy at the end of that, but we survived it. And I had a month until the next one took place. And it was with, thankfully, with the late Brian Peterson, who was a joy to work with. It was in Dallas. And I spent the drive home from Arizona with a legal pad writing down everything that went wrong. And by the time I got home, I had made a list of all the things that you better check on and know what's going on.
Now you know where I get it from, John.
Mhm.
And when I got home, we had a postmortem to that event, and we made a set of rules of all the things that had. One of my rules when I'm going to go to a hotel is I have someone physically go to that hotel with a tape measure and measure the height of the ceiling. I just don't trust anybody to know how high their ceiling is. And then I know what kind of screen and what kind of projectors and stuff I'm going to. Back then, we used slide projectors. But anyway, the second one that we ran was near perfect. But we had learned how stupid I was and made rules to prevent it from happening again. And then, of course, we did a postmortem at the end of every event for years. And we always made changes to the way we did things after every event. But that's what you have to do if you're going to trust yourself to do something like this.
Preparation is oftentimes the key to success in so many things that we do in our lives. Being ready for it and anticipating contingencies, even when we go on big photo trips.
The preparation, the workshop's the easy part.
Yeah, it often is.
We prepare a lot individually and together so that when we get to the event, that's the relative easy part, and I learned that from him.
But the things that'll kill you if you run events is not paying attention to the dead obvious things. They're so obvious that you don't think it's anything to worry about, but it's something to worry about. I took flight training when I did the America from 500 Feet book, and the guy that trained me made a list of the 10 ways I was going to die doing the project because he knew the dangers of what we were doing. But one of the funniest things he wrote down, and it's absolutely true, he said, before you take off in an airplane, make sure that your tank is full of fuel. And he wrote as an adjunct to that on the sheet, the only time you have too much fuel is when you're on fire. And that's absolutely the kind of thinking you have to make events work. Things that seem stupid are the things that'll bury you if you don't think about them ahead of time and make preparation. I wasn't that smart. But
let me change tacks real quick, Bill. I just want to ask you my one question here before we're out of time today. How have you? So you've had a long photographic career. How have you stayed inspired and motivated creatively throughout all these years? Where does that come from? Is it just an internal thing, or did you work on it?
I think the biggest thing for me personally was that I didn't stick to just one kind of photography. I mean, I started out like everybody doing a few weddings, knew I hated that. But I did commercial work. I did nature and landscape. I got into close up. I did some commercial product photography. And then, of course, I got into nature and landscape really big. But all the time, I've never allowed myself to specialize in just one thing. I found the more variety of kind of subjects that you shoot, the more it broadens your general photographic education and approach. And by keeping it fresh and always trying to learn something that I didn't know well, it just expanded my horizons. And to this day, I'm just as happy shooting an old barn as I am shooting a beautiful landscape. I like to make photographs, and changing up the subject matter often, I think, keeps it fresh.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful. I agree 100% with everything you said. 100%. I think a diversity of subjects, besides keeping things fresh, also helps build our creative muscles. Solving problems, compositional challenges, helps build our knowledge, skills, and abilities. And those are the things that's what keeps me coming back for more. Is the challenge of solving a compositional challenge. Yes.
Bill taught me, he used to say that if you look back on your images 3 years ago, and if you don't see, kind of a significant improvement in your work, there's something not right. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think the key is to steadily progress. And none of us will ever get so good that we can't see things that we could do better. And you have to you don't beat yourself up. I mean, you don't want to be miserable about it, but don't give yourself permission to say I've arrived, because I frankly don't think anybody ever arrives. I think you
Well,
just,
well, I mean, that's just a whole nother podcast right there that just came up in my head is what do you measure progress against? How do you know what is arrival? What's a finish line? All of this seems, or we speak about it in like definable metrics, but this is art, and so what is progress in the art world?
well, I think for me, first of all, I expose myself to as
Uh-oh.
much good photography as I can, because I learn a great deal from seeing how other people approach a subject or a condition. Um, I learn from that. The second thing is, I'm actually not competing against anyone except myself.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be foolhardy for me to look at the images of yours that show up on my Instagram feed and kick myself in the butt because I hadn't shot that particular subject as well as you did, or Jack, or anybody else. And believe me, I started my career hanging out with David Munch and John Shaw and Art Wolf and Galen Rowell. And I mean, these were the people that were the best of the best. So I got lots and lots of humble pie, many servings of it early on, as I
Mhm.
saw how good they were. But I also learned that, hey, if they can do it, if I stay with this and work at it hard enough, maybe I can arrive somewhere close to there. I don't think I've ever arrived where Art Wolf is or David Moon, some of those people, but I think I've become more confident than I was. And you just keep plugging away and enjoy it. Have fun with it. If you're not enjoying it, take up golf. I mean,
We interviewed Art, and you can go back and listen to those podcasts. And Art came right out and said he's not where he wants to be either. I don't think anybody ever is.
No.
So,
Well, that's kind of part of that drive that keeps us going and going. It's that
right.
quest to improve ourselves.
and
And
don't pay attention to your cheerleaders or your critics.
yeah,
Nobody really knows. You're the only one that can judge how you're doing. You know how well you've done in the past, and uh, I can shoot something and look at it and say, "This is a good shot. I'm happy with this." But I can shoot something and say, "Man, this sucks. I don't know what I was thinking, where my head was when I shot this." You just got to be realistic with yourself and have a set of standards that are reasonable, and then stick to those standards and force yourself to do what you know you have to do.
And enjoy it.
Yeah, have fun with it.
You know. Excuse me. Well, John, I think maybe we need to pick this up down the road here a little bit.
I think we should. I think this is a great
Volume
place
two,
for us to
volume
end
three,
for
volume
today.
four, and just keep going, because I mean we haven't even gotten through the JPW, and if we add in all the funny stories, and I want to do a couple of those if we can someday. We need a number of volumes here because Bill's done. We haven't even talked about the books and yeah, what have you. So I think that we'll put a nail in it for today. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds
And
fantastic.
pick
It's
it up
always,
again. And thank you, my friend.
Well, thank you all for spending time
Yeah.
with me, and have been fun to talk with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John, any final thoughts or
No, it's always a
pile
pleasure
on
and a
here?
joy to see Bill, the patriarch of my family tree.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, until next time, if you have any comments, ideas, it's wetalkphoto@gmail.com. And I have nothing else. So thank you for listening. We'll talk to you
Thank you
soon.
much.